Hello, here I am. It's nice to see everyone again. And here is a picture of the solar eclipse. This is this is a description of what it may look like in Arizona at the time when the sun and the moon coincide at about 4 a.m. in the morning. And that means that in Buffalo, New York, the eclipse will be seen, the East Coast will see the eclipse, a partial solar eclipse, at 7 o'clock, for example, in Buffalo, New York, and so on, east of there, depending on time zone. So what we see is here, it's a kind of a picture of the horizon. The AS means that's the ascendant, that's the number that's rising. And as you can see, there are a lot of planets here in this sector. So this is this whole sector here, very busy. And that is the first sector of spring in the Kalapurusha chart. That means that the first month of spring represents the first sector of the circle of 12 zodiac positions. 2,000 years ago, it was called Aries, where the sun and the moon are going to coincide and create a solar eclipse. And now all these positions have changed in the sky. Every 2,000 years they change. So every 2,100 years, basically, they change the shift. So that number one position is now occupied by what we call Pisces. Pisces, as I've mentioned before, represented the month before winter in the circle above and below the equator. When we divide it into the peak of summer and lowest point of the circle in winter, and then the equinoxes at the equator, basically we then divide each sector into 3 parts. We have 12 parts to create the zodiac. And so what's happening is a lot of energy is being funneled through that first sector. And there's the moon there as well. So I wanted to show you in terms of squares. There are many ways of describing astrology. So one way in southern India, they create squares to show you the different constellations and sectors. And it starts with Pisces here, and then it goes, these are terms, number 12 sector here, and then we've got all these other, that's Aries, it goes clockwise, there's Aries, and then there's Taurus and Gemini and Cancer, and so on. So in terms of our chart for the eclipse, we see that that the planets have congregated there in what we call Aries, Sun, Moon. Those are symbols for Sun, Moon, Mercury. Mercury's retrograde, so you have to watch communication a bit these days. And then there's also the energy of Mars. Mars is in the number 4 sector. You see the circle with the arrow. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little dim. In any case, that's Mars. And that means it's high in the sky. Number 4 sector is the highest point in the sky above the equator as far as the sun's path. So we called it many years ago Cancer. That's the sign of emotion. So Mars being in high position like that, kind of intense, is a little bit karmic. Emotionally, everybody's feeling a little more intense. At least that's what people tell me. And then we have Rahu, Saturn, Rahu, what north node of the moon, and Venus retrograde again, up in the number 12 sector, which we call Pisces. But these are all very close together. That's why it's a very intense kind of combination. So, and then we have K2 over here. That's a south node of the moon. So and then Jupiter is here. Jupiter will rise to the highest point in the sky in near future, in August, and it will go here, and will combine beautifully with Venus to create a bright star in the sky. For all of us, that's a very blessed time. So as we get into the second half of the year, some of these intensities will get better. So right now, Rahu is over here, 27 degrees, very close to where these planets are. And so this combination here creates, as I said, a lot of intensity. And Rahu aspects Mars. So there's a Rahu combination, it aspects Mars. So it's called restless and intense. And we also have all these retrograde planets. And Mercury being close to the Sun, the experience, Mercury represents the nervous system. And the experience has been that during times when Mercury is very close to the Sun, there's a kind of a feeling of things, it's very pitta, or you feel fire in your nervous system. It's kind of like burnt out feeling. And now, not everyone may feel this. It depends on how subtle a person is. But we feel like something is changing. And as we get into the end of May, into June, Saturn is going to be shifting into this sector, which we called Aries. And it's going to be where the Sun is now. The Sun is considered powerful there, exalted, because that's the beginning of spring and there's a lot of energy. Saturn will be shifting, Jupiter will be shifting, Rahu and Ketu have just shifted in January, February. You can see that they're high in degrees, and they go backwards, so they count down. So it's 27, 26, 25, 24, like that. And so it's a kind of transitional time. People feel like wherever these energies can, intersect. I've seen for some people, this Rahu Mars intersects in the house of career, so it creates a kind of a feeling of uncertainty in that area, and like something's shifting. And certainly the politics of things now involve changes that are going on, at least in the United States, quite a bit of change, other places as well. And we also have, wherever those planets will congregate, it will create a feeling of transformation. And so Saturn being within 3 degrees of Rahu here means that Saturn, Rahu, and Mars are, because it aspects Mars, they're all interacting. They're interacting. And whoever is having that Mars position in, say, the home, then you feel that intensity in the home, or if it's in the house of relationship, it's in relationship, depending on where in the zodiac the rising sign is, what sector of the sky of the yearly sectors was rising, whether we call it Aries or Taurus or whatever it is. That sector, when it's rising, then it affects us. And from another angle, for those of you who like to look at another version of this, we have the North Indian chart that shows pretty much the same thing. This, if you tipped it on its side, this would be like the horizon, the middle. If you put the vertical line through the middle, through the center, that would be the horizon, and all the planets on this side would be what's above you, and all these planets are what's below you, underneath your feet. So we see the same arrangement. All these planets, Saturn, Rahu, Venus, they're all combined in in the number 12 sector. The number 12 sector, again, was the position of the sector of the wheel of the zodiac, representing last month of winter, a kind of a spiritual energy. So there's a lot of spiritual transformation, we could say. And then there is the solar eclipse. The sun is right now, this is the first number 1 sector, the first month of spring, because the equinox was on March 21st. And so we have a lot going on. And I'd like to say that the planets, as we've talked about, there's scientific basis that they affect us. It changes the electromagnetic field on the Earth depending on how the planets arrange themselves relative to the solar wind. And this was found by an engineer at RCA, head engineer John Nelson. He studied that for 20 years and could predict solar flares and so on from it. And then Max Planck Institute studied this in Germany in the earlier part of the 20th century. And it has to do with the arrangement of how the planets' geometry relative to each other affects the solar wind. So certain geometries, they allow smooth flow to us. Certain other geometries of arrangements of planets, they create a kind of turbulence. So whenever there's turbulence, the electromagnetic field of this Earth gets affected, and it's more static. And we're not even talking about gravitational influences, because we know, for example, the moon pulls the tides, the water of the Earth 20 feet into the sky every month, high tide. So of course there are gravity waves. So we have all these influences on us, depending on where the planets are. If they're all bunched up, then they pull on us. Now a lot of people are feeling like, oh, this is the turning point in all of civilization, spiritual turning point. There's an issue because all this, they think that all this alignment in the East, they think all this alignment takes place in the number 12 sector of the zodiac wheel, and they assign the same meaning to the number 12 sector as it was 2,000 years ago, to the number 12, to Pisces, what they called Pisces. They assigned the same meaning to Pisces, which was the number 12 sector 2,000 years ago, and that represented the last month of winter. So that was a spiritual awakening, sort of right before all of nature wakes up. However, the reality is that the first sector of spring, which now is Pisces, after Soma is the actual constellation Pisces, the sun lines up with that actual constellation. That's a dynamic time. It's a creative time. It's instead of the silent transcendence of the last month of spring. So essentially all the planets that are in Pisces, which I mentioned, Mercury was there, and also the sun and moon for this alignment, they actually occupy the sector that was aligned with Aries, so first month of spring, 2,000 years ago. And so on the eclipse day, the sun, moon, and Mercury will occupy the number 1 sector of the yearly, what I call Kalapurusha, the yearly wheel of time, which was formerly labeled Aries 2,000 years ago. So it means there's a creative phase. Usually eclipses have an influence that can last anywhere from 6 months to a year. So you could say it marks a new creative phase in our lives. And if we look at the mundane chart, or the chart for a country, for example, USA, and this was a cognition I had years ago, and it was kind of confirmed by a great yogi. His name was Yogi Carve, about the actual chart of the U.S. So let's talk about the U.S., some thoughts about it. So we have what's called a weak position of Mars in the 11th house. That represents financial work on national debts, as well as that same sort of weak little karmic Mars influence on the house of service that represents government employees, as well as people who challenge us or enemies. In this case, not the opposite of friends of, say, the U.S. And that Mars is in the house of national friendships, so other countries that are our friends. So I would say it's a bit intense regarding friendship with our national allies. Also dealing with debts that we have regarding, because Mars represents debts. The Sun, Moon, and Mercury are in the house of transformation for the national chart. And that means creative transformation and soul searching on the national level. So there's a lot of transformation. And Moon represents finances also for the chart of our country here in the U.S. And the Sun represents foreign countries. So for that chart, you could say the 12th lord of that area. And so it indicates some transformation regarding both our finances, friendships, and also foreign countries. However, the Sun is exalted. It's the beginning of spring, so it has this life energy. So I would say the change will result in some kind of powerful transformation that will strengthen. On the eclipse day, Saturn and Rahu will be in the house of relationships, kind of like the house of marriage for a person, but the house of connecting to other countries for the United States, for example. And Rahu and Saturn, they tend to give laissez-faire, self-sufficiency, and kind of a little bit of space needed. It's kind of a divorce energy, but also it can bring some things together, but it's kind of a separation energy. However, because Venus is exalted in that same position of relationships, and Venus represents all love and relationships, there is positive energy for national relationships. So it's a kind of a mixed bag of needing space and then connecting, needing space, connecting, as far as the country and its relationship to other countries. And there's some astrologers, there's a question about some astrologers say that all these many planets bunched up, they're kind of looking at Ketu, the south node of the moon, which is very spiritual. So because of that, the idea was there's going to be an uprising of spirituality. I think anytime there's huge transformation like that, we all turn towards the divine for support, because there's only one stability, and that's the divine. That inner essence that's omnipresent, that's there at all times. The fortunate thing, and from every tradition, every religion, we have a very comforting thought, which is that the nature of the Supreme Being is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. So omnipresent means he's right where you are, he or she, depending on what. God is beyond all gender labels. He's got everybody's included. So men, women, everybody. Male, female, whatever it is, all different combinations, they're all included within the Supreme Being, because he has generated everybody. So how could he or she not have all those qualities? So that's one thing, that omnipresent. So right where you are, you don't have to look far, right where you are, there's that divine consciousness, because it's omnipresent. We're swimming in it like fish in water. And omniscient means that intelligence, that consciousness, knows exactly what's going on in every little fabric of its creation, meaning you, me, everybody. So there's comfort in that. And omnipotent. Many cultures describe this as everything is God's will. So he's running the show. You could say behind the scenes is that omniscient intelligence. So so we do have, from the astrology side, we have this quality of Saturn and Venus across from Ketu, with some influence from Mercury also, because Mercury is 0 degree. He's almost in the number 12 sector, which we call Pisces, 2,000 years ago. Some astrologers have felt that because they thought that there's a kind of a yod, or what, finger of God energy all towards Ketu, because the idea was there was a kind of a energy all coming from Pisces down to Ketu. But it's actually not exactly the case. So there's a partial quality of that. Certainly very intense, a lot of transformation, and there is a focus on some spirituality. And it's the first month of spring, so the sun and the moon are in creative position. We call that in astrology cardinal position. So that's why this is a partial eclipse, not a total eclipse. It's not complete alignment. Nevertheless, we have some energies for this year as we have described. The second half of the year, I think, will be more spectacular, especially with Venus and Jupiter conjunction in August, where it reaches the highest position in the sky, number 4 sector of the 360 degrees of the sun, going above and below the equator. So it will look like a very bright star, a positive event. The brightest planets in the sky are Venus and Jupiter, and they're going to go together. They're going to be together. And that's very positive. Some people want to think of this as the start of a new age, this upcoming eclipse. I would say the 7-planet alignment in February was even more intense in some ways than this, because this is only partial eclipse. I think that we are already past this whole idea of new age transformation having begun at a certain point, thinking that it's this particular year. I call it that already has passed. We already have gone into a new age, except it may take some time to undo all the old conditioning, all the old stresses, patterns. So people are more awake already, and there will be some more transformations within this new age. I figured, I don't know, a figure comes to me, maybe it will take 300 years to clean up everything, for it to look outside like a new age. There are too many wars, there's too much pollution, there's too much going on to say this is the full sunshine of that age. It's certainly the beginning of a collective heightening of awareness. My own experience was that on December 21st of 2012, at 3:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, when the Mayans had predicted, which was amazing because they were right on, that was when the whole galaxy, our whole Milky Way, ascended to unity consciousness on the atomic or subatomic level. I was meditating at that time, not really sure if that would be a time when anything would happen. And what happened was this enormous pulse from the center of the galaxy. I was meditating, and I thought, around that time, I thought, well, maybe this is just BS. But it turned out to be true, because all of a sudden, to my total unexpectedness, in my meditation, I experienced this pulse from the center of the galaxy. It felt like such enormous energy going through everything. And every atom started to just sing as if, and I felt like my body was turning into pure energy and ascending. And I felt it was a decision made by, I think, supreme decision. It was just in a split second, the divine wanted it to be higher consciousness. And the rest, that's a whole story. I could tell this story maybe one of these times. But what I was so pleased to see that the ancient Mayans had such accuracy to be able to predict down to the minute something that I just was unbelievable. If I hadn't experienced it, I couldn't tell you that, yeah, this was real, totally real. I thought when it happened, I was going to die. The energy was that powerful, and it was like, I wasn't sure if my body could take it, and I was going to, and then it settled down, and it was a beautiful experience, really beautiful. So I feel very blessed. I was in the right place at the right time to experience it. And as I said, it might take 300 years for the surface to match, for the surface experience of life to match what already happened on a fundamental level. Now, speaking about this year, every eclipse, every solar eclipse, partial or not so partial, every lunar eclipse, it's a kind of a good time to meditate and feel a spiritual silence. It's a moment of, you could say, between dimensions. It's just silent. So partial eclipse means part of the sun's energy is blocked, for some, especially for some areas. Like I said, the East Coast will feel it more, and we'll see it. And East Coast of the States, and then east of there into Europe. So it means part of the sun's energy is blocked, and there's a momentary ebb and then restoration of our energy, a transcending and then coming back out. So the ultimate test of the eclipse will be, how do we feel? And observe, and just be observant on that day. How do you feel on the day, the time when this eclipse happens, if you're awake? What kind of special spiritual energy do you feel? It's part of our becoming more aware of our relationships with the planets and the rest of the universe. And so there's some good things coming up. But for those of you who are experiencing this kind of turbulence and this intensity, I hope I've answered a little bit, because we've got this bunching up of Rahu, Saturn, and looking at Mars as a kind of combination, and wherever that falls, it creates kind of a activity for both a nation, whatever the nation's chart is, its matrix of energies when it was born. It will create some kind of something going on in some sector of one's life, and then it will click into place once that transit's over, and then you feel, again, life is more stable. And main thing is to keep yourself anchored to that which is omnipresent, to be centered in your own being, and do things that kind of balance you out. So that was maybe a long-winded talk about what might be happening on this solar partial eclipse. And I hope it made sense. And I'll continue on with the talking about astrology in future tapes here, and I'd like to actually I will start doing a course where we'll just sort of together we can look at, all right, how do you look at a chart? Here's this matrix of energies when someone is born, and how can we understand this matrix? It's very fascinating. And as I said before, one of the great founders of Western psychology was also a great astrologer, and that was Carl Jung. So he used that to understand more deeply the nature of things. He's the one who described archetype energies, but he was very, very, very deep guy, and apparently understood quite a bit about the nature of how energies shift and the astrology of it and all that. He was actually in communication with the astrologers, one of the key astrologers, Vedic astrologers of India. I believe it was B.V. Raman. So, kind of interesting history. Anyway, have a good solar eclipse. Enjoy and meditate a little bit and feel your connection to the universe. We'll see you.